All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're gonna be tackling something pretty cool. We've got a set of interview questions. They're for a training and development manager role.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So these aren't just, like random questions someone threw together. These are designed to really get at like what makes a good training program, how companies think about developing their people.
It's like a peek behind the curtain, right?
Yeah.
Like we get to see what they're really looking for when they're trying to build
Yeah.
a really strong team.
Exactly. So that's our mission today. We're going to break down these questions, see what we can learn about effective employee training. So, if you're listening, you can almost think of this as like a master class in how to create a learning culture based on what we're seeing in these
I
questions.
love that. It's like a cheat sheet for building a smarter, more skilled workforce.
Exactly. Okay, so let's dive in. One of the first things that I noticed, just like right off the bat, was how many different training methods they mentioned. Classroom training, online courses, webinars, workshops, like the whole gamut.
Yeah, and what that says to me is that good training isn't about sticking to just one way of doing things. Um, it's about being flexible, you know, being able to tailor the approach to whatever the situation calls for.
So you're saying it's not like a one-size-fits-all kind of deal?
Exactly. It's about figuring out the best way for this group of people to learn this particular skill, you know?
Yeah,
And that might look different for every team in every situation.
makes sense. Now, the sources also talked about using technology, especially for virtual teams, and this idea of like applying adult learning principles. Like, how are those two things shaping the way companies train their employees these days?
Well, if you think about it, technology has just opened up so many more possibilities for how and where people can learn. Like, you don't have to be in the same room anymore to learn together. But the key is you got to use technology in a way that actually works for adults.
So it's not just about like throwing together a quick online course and calling it a day.
Right, exactly. Adults learn differently than kids. They need to see the relevance of what they're learning, you know.
Yeah.
They need to have some control over the process, and they need to feel like their time is being used well. So, good training programs are designed with all of that in mind.
Okay, so we've talked about methods, we've talked about tech, we've talked about how adults learn. Now let's talk about the person who's actually leading all this. Like, what makes a good training and development manager? What are those must-have qualities?
You know, it's funny because when you read through these interview questions, you really start to get a sense of the kind of person they're looking for. And it's not just about skills. It's about a certain mindset, you know.
Mindset.
Yeah, like a real passion for helping people grow. You can teach someone the technical stuff, but you can't really teach them to genuinely care about developing others. That's something that has to come from within, you know?
Yeah, that makes sense. But okay, skills are still important, right? Like, what are we talking about here?
Oh, absolutely. The sources specifically mention things like strong communication skills,
Mm.
being super organized, having good leadership qualities.
Those are pretty important for any management role, I imagine.
Right, but then there's also the stuff that's specific to training, like being able to create engaging content, knowing how to use different training technologies, and having a deep understanding of how adults learn best.
So it's like a mix of those core management skills plus the specialized training expertise.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they're looking for someone who can not only manage the logistics of training, but also design and deliver really effective learning experiences.
Okay, so let's say you've got this amazing training manager. They've got all the right skills, the right mindset. They're ready to go. And they get tasked with training a brand new team. Like they're starting from scratch.
Right.
What does that process look like?
Well, based on these interview questions, it sounds like the first step is really getting to know the team. Like, what are their individual needs? What are their backgrounds? What are their goals?
So a lot of individual assessments.
Yeah, they'll probably do interviews, maybe some surveys, anything to get a good sense
Yeah.
of where each person is starting from. Because even in a brand new team, everyone's going to have different experiences and different learning styles.
Okay, so you figure out where everyone's at. Then what?
Then you got to develop a plan,
Right.
right? A good training plan. And this is where it gets really strategic.
Strategic how?
Well, you got to have clear objectives. Like, what do you want people to be able to do after the training? What skills do you want them to have? Then you got to figure out the best activities and materials to help them get there. And you got to think about timing too. Like, how long will the training take? When will it be delivered?
Oh, so it's like a whole project plan, almost.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And remember, you got to keep those adult learning principles in mind throughout the whole process. Make sure the training is relevant, engaging, and gives people some control over how they learn.
Okay, so the training's done. Everyone's learned a bunch of new stuff.
Yeah.
How do you know if it actually worked? Like, how do you measure the success of a training program?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And the answer is you got to have a good evaluation process in place.
Yeah.
And that starts way back at the beginning when you're setting those objectives for the training.
So you're saying you got to know what you're measuring before you even start.
Exactly. What are the specific outcomes you're hoping to achieve? Is it improved performance, better customer satisfaction, increased retention? Whatever it is, you got to have a way to track it. And that usually means collecting both quantitative and qualitative data.
Quantitative and qualitative.
Yeah, so quantitative data is like numbers. Think test scores, completion rates, things like that. But qualitative data is more about people's experiences. So you might do surveys, interviews, focus groups. Just get a sense of how people felt about the training and whether they think it made a difference.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, let's be real for a second. Not everyone's going to be super excited about training, right? Like, what happens if you've got someone who's resistant to the material or maybe struggling to keep up?
Yeah, you're going to have those situations as part of the job. And the key is to approach those situations with empathy and understanding. Don't just label someone as difficult. Try to figure out why they're struggling. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they don't see the relevance. Maybe there's something else going on in their life.
So it's about being a little bit of a detective, almost.
Yeah, exactly. Once you understand the why, then you can start to figure out how to help. Maybe they need some extra support. Maybe they need a different learning style. Maybe they just need someone to listen to them.
Okay, let's imagine I'm a brand new training manager. I'm walking into this role for the first time. What should be my top priorities in those first few months?
First things first, you got to learn the ropes. Get a really good understanding of the organization's training needs, both short-term and long-term. Look at the existing programs, see what's working and what's not, talk to people, get their feedback. Really immerse yourself in the culture.
So it's a lot of information gathering at the beginning.
Yeah, and relationship building, too. You got to build strong relationships with key stakeholders across different departments. They're going to be your partners in all of this. And, of course, you got to stay up to date on the latest trends in training and development. Like, what are other companies doing? What new technologies are out there?
Okay, so I'm up to speed. I've built relationships. I know what the needs are. What about when things go wrong? Like, let's say a company rolls out a new policy, but people just aren't following it. What's the training manager's role in that situation?
This is where you got to become a bit of a problem solver. The first step is to figure out why people aren't complying. Is the policy unclear? Did they not get enough training on it? Are there roadblocks preventing them from following it?
So again, it's back to being a detective.
Pretty much. And once you understand the reasons, then you can start to develop solutions. Maybe you need to create some new training materials. Maybe you need to offer some refresher sessions. Maybe you need to work with management to make sure the policy is being enforced consistently.
Okay, this is making me realize just how important communication is in all of this. Like, how does a good training manager make sure they're communicating effectively?
Communication is key, no doubt about it. And it's got to be two-way. So with management, you got to be really clear about expectations, progress updates, things like that. You got to seek their feedback and be responsive to their concerns.
Times with employees.
With employees, it's all about creating a safe and supportive environment where they feel comfortable asking questions, voicing concerns, sharing their ideas. You got to be a good listener, a good coach, a good advocate for their learning needs.
Makes sense. Now, the sources also mentioned something about the connection between training and HR policies. What's that all about?
Well, a good training manager needs to be well-versed in the company's HR policies. Like, they need to know what those policies say, how they impact training, and how to make sure employees are aware of their rights and responsibilities.
So it's not just about training on specific skills. It's also about making sure people understand the bigger picture of the workplace.
Exactly. And sometimes the training manager might even be involved in developing or updating HR policies. Like, let's say there's a new policy on diversity and inclusion. The training manager might be tasked with creating training materials to help employees understand and comply with that policy.
Okay, that's interesting. Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the timing of training. Like, when is the best time to deliver training to employees?
There's no easy answer to that one. It really depends on the situation. Sometimes it makes sense to do training right away. Like, let's say you're rolling out a new software system. You probably want to train people on that system before they start using it.
So they don't get totally lost.
Right. But sometimes it makes more sense to wait a bit. Like, maybe you want to give people some time to get settled into their roles before you hit them with a bunch of training.
So they have some context for what they're learning.
Yeah, exactly. The key is to think about the needs of the employees and the organization, and then tailor the timing of the training accordingly.
All right, let's talk about something that's super relevant these days. Digital training. What are some of the tools and platforms that a good training manager should be familiar with?
Oh, there's a ton of cool stuff out there these days. Webinars, virtual classrooms, online courses, mobile learning apps, even social media platforms like LinkedIn Learning and YouTube. There's so much potential to create engaging and effective learning experiences online.
It's like the whole world of learning has opened up.
It really has. But just like with any kind of training, you got to be thoughtful about how you use these tools. It's not just about throwing technology at the problem, it's about using it strategically to meet the needs of your learners.
Okay, so let's say I'm putting together a training presentation. What are some tips for making it really engaging and memorable?
The most important thing is to know your audience. Who are you presenting to? What are their needs? What are their interests? Once you understand that, you can start to tailor your content and your delivery style to make it really resonate with them.
So it's not just about the information itself, it's about how you present it.
Exactly. You got to keep things clear, concise, and engaging. Use visuals, use storytelling, use humor if it's appropriate, and practice, practice, practice. The more comfortable you are with the material, the more confident you'll be when you deliver it.
Makes sense. Now, for someone who's really passionate about training and development, what are some of the things that can help them stand out in this field?
Well, experience is always valuable. The more experience you have designing, developing, and delivering training programs, the more marketable you'll be. But it's not just about quantity, it's about quality. You got to be able to show that your training programs have actually made a difference. Like, have they improved employee performance? Have they helped the organization achieve its goals?
So it's about being able to demonstrate results.
Absolutely. And it's also about staying up to date on the latest trends and best practices. Like, are you familiar with different learning styles? Do you know how to use the latest training technologies? Are you passionate about continuous learning?
It's like being a lifelong learner yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And then there are those softer skills like communication, relationship building, leadership. Those are all super important in this field.
Makes sense. So we've talked about a lot of different aspects of training today. If you had to pick just one thing that you think is absolutely crucial for a successful training program, what would it be?
I'd have to say it's having a clear and well-defined plan. Like, what are you trying to achieve with this training? What are your specific goals? How will you measure success? If you don't have a good plan in place from the beginning, you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Okay, so plan, plan, plan. Got it. Now, how often should employees be getting trained?
It really depends on the organization and the industry. But in general, I think it's safe to say that training should be an ongoing process. It's not just a one-time event. Employees need to be constantly learning and developing new skills to stay competitive in today's market.
So it's like a continuous cycle of learning and development.
Exactly. And that might involve a mix of different approaches. Like, you might have formal training sessions, online courses, mentoring programs, on-the-job training. The key is to create a culture of learning where employees feel supported and encouraged to grow.
Okay, last question. What happens when new laws or regulations come out that employees need to be aware of? How does that usually get handled from a training perspective?
Usually the legal department or HR will be the ones to notify the training manager about any new laws or regulations that are relevant to the company. And then the training manager will need to figure out the best way to communicate those changes to employees. That might involve creating new training materials, updating existing materials, or even delivering some live training sessions.
So it's all about making sure employees have the information they need to stay compliant.
Exactly. And it's also about making sure they understand the why behind the changes. Like, why is this new law important? How does it impact our work? The more employees understand the rationale behind the changes, the more likely they are to comply with them.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything today. We've gone from the very basics of what training and development is all about to some really nuanced topics like measuring effectiveness and handling difficult employee situations.
Yeah, it's been a pretty comprehensive deep dive. And you know, what's really cool is that a lot of these principles and best practices that we've talked about today are actually applicable beyond just the world of formal training.
Like how?
Well, think about it. When you're communicating with anyone, whether it's your boss, your coworker, or even a friend, you're essentially trying to convey information in a way that's clear, engaging, and memorable. And a lot of the techniques that we use in training, like setting clear objectives, using visuals, telling stories, getting feedback, those can all be really helpful in any communication situation.
So it's like thinking about every interaction as a potential learning opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really powerful mindset to have because it means that we're all constantly growing and learning, both from each other and from our own experiences.
So for our final thought today, I want you to consider this. What if we all approached sharing knowledge and ideas with the same level of intentionality and structure that we've explored in the world of professional training today? What if we saw every conversation, every email, every interaction as a chance to help someone learn and grow? I think that would be pretty amazing.
I completely agree. I think it would make a huge difference in the way we communicate and connect with each other.
All right, that's all the time we have